Well, welcome to my live show. So grateful for the opportunity to be with you all today on this Thursday. We've got an exciting topic that we're going to be talking about as we try to think about how we market to millennials. But I'll give you more insight on that in a little bit and share with you our special guest who will be joining us in a few minutes. But as you're joining into the broadcast, if you could identify who you are and the school that you're representing, what location you're at, that would be awesome. We would love to just see who's joining in on the broadcast today. I'm actually using a brand new platform that I've never used before, so fingers crossed that everything will go fine. This is a platform called StreamYard, and StreamYard allows me to do even more than the previous platform that I was using. So I have been using BeLive, and so BeLive's great. You can broadcast to either Facebook or YouTube, and but this program, StreamYard, allows me to broadcast to up to 5 channels. Again, it depends upon the package that you purchase, but this is a great opportunity to be able to connect on multiple channels. In fact, I am broadcasting to 3 different channels today. My Enrollment Catalyst Facebook page, my Enrollment Catalyst Inner Circle, which is a private group for schools that I've worked with in the past or working with currently, and then also my YouTube channel. So I have the opportunity in the future to be able to add in LinkedIn. So there's lots of great possibilities using this platform. One of my schools that I've worked with in the past, Ryan Abramson from Holy Ghost Prep, has been using this platform over the last month. And he has done a lot of different creative broadcasts. In fact, if I can share my screen here, I want to just show you their Facebook page, so that you can check out what he's been able to do. And so if you see this on his Facebook page, one of the things that they've been able to do is to be able to communicate lots of different activities. They had a town hall meeting where they had lots of interaction. They also had a preview. In fact, that's what you're seeing here, where Ryan was able to do live broadcasting for the preview, and he was able to bring in a bunch of different videos that he had recorded. So you may be interested in checking out this platform. I think it's really a great tool that you could utilize. So you could check out Holy Ghost Prep on their website as well, and be able to see the different ways that they're using this platform. So we have a lot of guests joining us today. So Rebecca's here from Chicago. We have some users here from North Creek Academy in California, Canterbury School in Florida. One of the downsides is that if you're coming in from a private group, I can't see who you are. So because it's a private group, it doesn't allow that access to be able to identify the specific Facebook user. Jill's here from St. Peter in Arlington Heights, Illinois. Laura's here from Portsmouth Christian. Great to have you, Laura. In fact, I interviewed the team from Portsmouth Christian last week. Kelly's here from the River Academy in Wenatchee, Washington. Great to have you. Nikki's here from Lafayette Catholic in Indiana, and Susan's here from Whittle School and Studios in DC. So it's great to have you here, Susan. And Ginger's here from Fax, so supporting Jaclyn and Courtney as part of the audience. So great to have you, Ginger. And Melody's here from Mananutton Military Academy. Again, I may have butchered that name again. I apologize, Melody. And we have Wendy here from JDS in Seattle, and Lisa's here from Exceed Prep down in South Florida, the Miami area. Sarah's here from Whitfield Academy in Georgia, and Don's here from Sacred Heart Academy, and Madeline's here from North Lake Christian School in Covington, Louisiana. Kristen's here from Johnstown Christian in Pennsylvania, and we have a guest here from Merritt Academy in Fairfax, Virginia. So great to have a number of people who are joining in on the live show today. And again, we have a great topic of marketing to millennials that we're going to be able to focus in on. And so, as you know, I do this live show every Thursday now. So every Thursday at noon Eastern time. In fact, next week we have a great show lined up. We're going to be talking about lead generation. So how do you attract leads through paid search and also landing pages, downloadable content? With a special guest, Andy Lynch and Clark Morgan from North Star Marketing will be joining me next Thursday. So a great topic. Matt's here from Grace Baptist in Chattanooga. So great to have you here, Matt. And again, if you're joining in, let us know where you're from so that I can recognize you as part of the show today. Well, I have two guests that I've known for several years. In fact, they both have done a webinar for me off my Enrollment Catalyst website that we did about 3 or so years ago. And Courtney and Jaclyn were able to present on this topic of marketing to millennials. And they've also had the opportunity to present workshops throughout the country at various organizations, including NAIS and their own FACS Elevate conference. And so grateful for both of them being here. And I want to introduce to you first, Courtney. Hi, Courtney.
Hey, how are you? It's good to be here.
Yeah, we're doing great. Thanks for joining us, Courtney. And Courtney, you are the K-12 product manager at FACS. What does that mean?
That is a great question. So for our student information system, our application and enrollment, and then our school site website product, I manage the roadmap. So for our FACS customers, all of those suggestions that you're putting into user voice, they really do go somewhere. They come to me. So I work with a team of product owners to really try to figure out what our clients need to figure out future development. So it's really fun. I get to work with lots of different schools and lots of different areas of the company.
Awesome. And your background, though, is in admissions. You worked at two schools before making the move to FACS. So that's great.
Right. Yeah. So I've been with FACS now for 2 years on Monday, actually. But before coming to FACS, I was in private and faith-based schools for 17 years. So started out teaching English, and then I moved into administration as a assistant principal and some educational technology stuff in there. But most recently, I was the director of marketing and enrollment at 2 of our FACS schools in Louisiana. So I brought FACS to my school back in 2010. So long history. And I just love FACS so much, I came to work here.
That's great. Wonderful. And then your colleague is here with us, Jaclyn Day. Glad to have you, Jaclyn.
Hello. Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and Jaclyn, you're the senior marketing manager for FACS.
That's right.
So what does a senior marketing manager do?
Yeah, again, great question. So do all the marketing for FACS. So, we handle everything from inbound marketing, outbound marketing, corporate communications, and work with a couple different brands. And yeah, we have a team that executes all the marketing here, work closely with our product team, sales team, work with Courtney pretty frequently. She gives me a hard time about being a millennial.
I bet.
You would think that she's the one in marketing with that backdrop, though.
Yeah, look at that.
I told you before we came on, I am just hiding the craziness of having 5 people at my house for 3 months together.
I need one.
Exactly. Yeah, I have one here hiding the mess behind my behind the curtain here, on my desk. But so you two are both in marketing. So what is FACS? Give us an overview, because some of the audience members may not be aware of FACS and what you guys do.
We do a lot. So FACS does pretty much everything that a school needs. So we are a K-12 educational technology company. We provide everything from financial management services to a student information system, products everywhere in between. So you can check us out at facsmgt.com and see everything that we have to offer. It's a lot of products and services, but we really just aim to elevate the education experience for families, teachers, parents, administrators. We try to serve every person in the school to the best of our ability. And that's been our mission for, dozens of years. And we're constantly trying to continue to innovate, listen to our customers, provide a better experience for them. And that's really sort of one of our core values, is listening to our customers, trying to continue to innovate on our platforms and provide a better experience for them as we continue pushing forward. Right now it's kind of a weird time, and we're trying to be there for our customers, provide them some resources. So we have a COVID resource page on our website too, with some great webinars on distance learning, things like that. Not just distance learning, but marketing, things like that. So we have some things there as well if schools want to check it out.
Excellent. I think I was reading on your website, you guys are in 11,500 schools worldwide.
Yep.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
And a lot of people may know facts from the tuition management side. You know, years ago, I mean, that's how I believe how your company started. And then a number of schools maybe RenWeb users or know that name in the past, and then they became part of the facts company. So at least that's all how I would communicate it. Is that what you would say?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah, and I have a lot of schools that I've worked with that use both facts and the administrative system and a lot of your tools. And so great resource. In fact, Courtney, I was just talking with you the other day, and you were sharing with me about some of the upgrades that you're doing to the admissions portion of the system, which is great.
Yeah, so that is, I'm so excited about that. Obviously, that's my natural bent coming from admissions and marketing, but we have already rolled out since the beginning of the year some really exciting features in our admissions platform just to help admissions directors work with their prospective students, not let anybody fall through the cracks. I mean, even, all those years ago, I very seldom had a staff to help me. It was pretty much like me, the enrollment office of one, and having tools to help me reach out to those leads and make sure that they, kind of walk through the funnel. And again, just not let anybody fall through the cracks. So I'm really excited about what has been developed since the beginning of the year and then what's coming.
Yeah, that's great. I'm excited about it as well because, to have that greater level of sophistication, what you can do in your contacts on the admissions side will be very helpful for schools that use the fax system. So let's get into our topic today, and let's talk about this whole area of marketing to millennials. But let's just first begin with what is a millennial? So Jaclyn and Courtney, how would you describe a millennial?
So, I started talking to schools about what is a millennial and how to market to millennials years ago. And back then, the conversations were a lot different than they are now. And I think there was this perception that millennials were sort of like the lazy ones at work, these young kids coming in off internships, and they would maybe be the parents of the young students at school, the pre-K, K kids, and the parents that were always on their phones, hard to reach. So really stereotypical type, it was just really stereotypical type millennial things that you would read in articles. And I think we really need to get past that when we talk about what a millennial means in terms of school marketing. So there are 72 million millennials in the US right now, which is about equal to the number of Gen X and baby boomers that exist. So they're about equal sized. Gen Z, which would be the kids of millennials and kids of Gen X parents, it's a much larger generation. So about 90 million of them. And that's just because the age range is so large and continues to grow. Every baby that's born is a Gen Z baby. There's a lot of babies being born.
Yes.
So
maybe more so in COVID-19, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we have no idea what that's going to look like. So a lot of millennials out there. And the age range is large. So a millennial could be 23 years old right now. So kind of just coming out of college, maybe they're in their first job. They could also be 39 years old, roughly 39 years old. Those are the age ranges that Pew Research uses. So when you think about that age discrepancy, they could be, just starting out in their first job, or 39, a 39-year-old could conceivably have a high school student. So that's a huge age range. And there's a lot of different things that you can extrapolate about those age ranges. And there's not one stereotype that fits those age ranges. So I think a lot of schools were like, oh, we need to do this, we need to do that. They're lazy. They're not going to read our emails. They're not going to do this. They're not going to do that. They're entitled. But millennials are they're a very complex generation, just like every other generation. And we need to be mindful of the fact that the parents in your schools are pretty much, by and large, all millennials now. And they're very different. There's not one thing we can say about them that's going to be true across the board, except for the demographic research that we can pull.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, newsflash, I am not a millennial. I am very squarely a Gen Xer. My husband and I have 3 daughters who are all Gen Zers, so I feel like I kind of missed the millennial generation there. So I rely on my colleagues like Jaclyn to give me best practices. But regarding stereotypes, it is so funny. You know, there's no shortage of, internet memes and all the kind of things that you can find about millennials. But it cracked me up at the beginning of the quarantine and all this COVID stuff. People were fussing about everybody partying at spring break, and they kept coming for the millennials. And then there were several tweets from millennials. One of them said, "Millennials are not partying on the beach. We are in our PJs, working from home, baking bread, watching Hulu, and yelling at our parents not to go outside. It's Gen Z you want." And I thought that was great. I thought it was good that the millennials kind of stood up for themselves, because again, I mean, certainly you can't stereotype an entire generation, but one of the things that, to Jaclyn's point, that is mentioned a lot with millennials is they're phone obsessed and they're social media obsessed. I don't think that's a millennial thing. I think that's we're in the year 2020 thing.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I am certainly not a millennial, but I would much prefer to text rather than call someone. I mean, look at all these grown-ups that are on TikTok during the quarantine. Like, I think it's just a sign of the times as opposed to something that's indicative of being a millennial.
Are you on TikTok?
Absolutely not. I draw the line there.
Yeah, I haven't figured out that platform, so oh well. So
I can barely figure out that platform.
Yeah, it looks fun and creative and crazy at times. So
yeah.
So talk to us about how a millennial parents, and why does that matter as we think about applying this to school marketing?
So I think this is a really interesting question. I think that millennials value relationships with their children. Data backs this up. So 76% of millennial parents say that they feel extremely close to their child. That's different than other generations. Other generations, it's much less. So grandparents will say like 25% of grandparents would have reported feeling close to their own child. So that's a pretty big discrepancy, 25% versus 76%. So they're very relational with their child. And I think that you see that in the way that they pick a school, right? They want to be able to picture their child thriving in a school. And it's more about their child's experience at a school as opposed to pure success, academic success. So that really comes into the way that we put messages and media out there where they can sort of picture their child having fun at a school or having enriched experiences at a school as opposed to just having strong academic success. That's why extracurriculars and sports and things are such popular marketing messages for schools. Another thing that's really interesting about the parenting aspect of the millennial generation is grandparent involvement. So a lot of millennial parents have grandparents really involved in their circle. So 49% of millennial parents have one of their own parents living within 30 minutes of them. That's often very different than other generations. I think it's 10% of millennial parents have a grandparent even living with them. So grandparents are really involved. This doesn't necessarily play into enrollment so much, but this absolutely benefits advancement and fundraising. So when you start thinking about that, that comes into play. And then 60% of millennials say that being a parent is extremely important to their overall identity. And that is across the board, whether it's a single parent household, whether it's a multi-generational household. So the parental identity is really important. And so you have sort of like family branding that's happening. And that extends to the choice of school. And I think that schools can take advantage of the desire to have the school be a part of the family's brand. And that also plays against the school because families change their family brand very frequently. So it's very hard to retain a family. You have to really cohesively weave your school into that family's brand so that they're not constantly on the search for something better. So that is really hard. And that's why schools say retention is really hard right now. And it's because a family is saying, well, this other school looks really interesting, and this other school looks really interesting, or they're not offering something that can improve my family's quality of life. So we're going to talk about this in a little bit, I think. But, I think that outcomes are really key for millennial families, and family branding really plays a part in enrollment and retention. One other thing I wanted to note about millennial parenting is that the millennial generation is by far the most racially and ethnically diverse generation. And so when we talk about millennial parenting, we can't remove the worries or concerns or aspirations that are deeply linked to finances or socioeconomic circumstances that play into all of those factors. So it might be easy for us to say, well, millennials parent this way, but all of those other factors do come into play. Geographic regions, rural regions, urban regions. So we need to look at millennial parenting within where your school is, who lives in your area, what zip codes are around your area, what housing is around your area, what new housing is being built, how easy it is to get to your school. That's a huge one. A lot of people don't think about that.
Yeah.
And sort of go from there. Yeah,
that's great. Courtney, you wanted to add some things?
Yeah, I would just add one of the things, again, from not being a millennial, one of the things that shocked me was in 2016, Forbes said, it's probably a higher percentage now, but they said 71% of millennials rank parenting websites and forums and blogs and social media as their first and second highest parental influence. And, so it's very normal for millennials to crowdsource and, ask their quote unquote Facebook groups and friends, quote unquote friends, where's the best preschool? What's the best educational app? And it kind of boggled my mind, because I'm thinking about, my oldest daughter is 19 years old. 19 years ago, I read like What to Expect When You're Expecting and talked to my mom, that was my parental influence. And just the fact that it's such the norm now for, crowdsourcing has been around for a little while, but it's such the norm for millennials to, to take into account what maybe perfect strangers on the internet actually think. That's just a different way of thinking, especially for someone from my generation.
Yeah, I really appreciate your insights into this topic and trying to understand the parents, because that's really who we're trying to reach. And so as we think about the millennials, how do they interact with their world, and even with your school, our schools out there? What does that relationship look like?
So I would just say very differently than they used to. Very, very differently. When I started in admissions and marketing about 12 years ago, of course, with no formal training. How many of us have any kind of formal training in enrollment management in K-12 schools? But literally the most sophisticated thing that we did was an ad in the Yellow Pages and a billboard on Highway 190, which is kind of the main highway where I live. And I thought I was big stuff for doing both of those things. But, admissions was very analog. Parents were interacting with schools by literally picking up the phone, calling, we schedule a tour, lots of hand holding, tons of personal interaction. They filled out a paper application. In 2010 is when my school adopted fax and actually went to online application, which, believe it or not, in 2010 was pretty revolutionary.
Right.
But when you think about just the shift between 2010 and 2020 now, the massive shift in the market of prospective students, it's really just mind-boggling. But one of the things too that was a real shift for me that I noticed probably in the last 4-ish years is going from that analog process. And, we kind of, as admissions and enrollment folks, we kind of know the funnel, and, it's inquiry to tour to application to enrollment. Well, we would start getting these applications in of people I'd never heard of. I'm like, who is this family? That doesn't even ring a bell. And once you started to kind of dig in a little bit, you realized that they were skipping the traditional funnel, right? They were skipping the inquiry and the tour part, because these mostly millennial families were so used to doing everything online that was as good as coming in. And it was a real mind shift for me. I'm real relational. I like to get to know my families. And some of our more traditional admissions folks, they really have a hard, me included, they really have a hard time with this, because I think there's a sense of, well, are you taking out the entire personalized aspect of it? This is why I went into admissions in the first place. Well, you're not. Of course you're not. You're just doing it in a different way. And it's been so interesting because, like I said, I kind of noticed that in my last couple of years working at a school. But now with COVID, I mean, guess what? Nobody's coming to campus. Nobody's picking up the phone and coming to a campus tour. They're relying on our websites as open house, and it's interesting to think about kind of how we will shift when we go back, if we go back, however we go back. But just when we think about tracking that funnel, and specifically, some of us are going to have to be educating our leadership and our heads of school and our boards on, I can't necessarily give you the direct admissions funnel from inquiry to tour to application, because it's just not happening that way anymore. So that was kind of the biggest shift for me, I guess, as a practitioner.
Yeah, one thing I would add is, I think, it's scary to draw stereotypes, but I think that one conclusion I think we can draw or should be thinking about at a high level, the biggest difference between interacting with millennial parents and Gen X parents is that millennial parents will be craving more of a relational experience with the school from start to finish. So from their first interaction with you, when they inquire, go through the admissions process, then they're involved in the school with the teacher, with the administration, they're going to want to feel that it's more of a personalized experience, and they're going to want it to feel much more relational. I think that Gen X parents, from what I've heard from schools and talked to schools, tend to be much more reactive. And if one thing goes wrong, they're not going to come directly to the school. They're going to go complain to 10 other parents, and they're going to immediately react, and you could have a bigger problem that happens. Whereas the millennial parent might be irritated and go look for other schools and start to sort of become isolated and shift away from the community. So you have sort of two cases there where, yes, the Gen X parent may be more loyal to the institution, but maybe more vocally difficult. And the millennial parent may be craving more of a one-on-one, hey, like, what happened? Let's talk it out. And then that's how you sort of inspire loyalty. So if you pull that back through to the inquiry process, you have to sort of take that all the way back to their initial interaction on your website and what they're really wanting from your school, and how they want to interact with your school is they want to feel like the only person that you're talking to. And they want to feel like their relationship with your head of school or with the teacher is meaningful, because that's not what they're going to get at a public institution. That's a differentiator. That may not be what they get at another private institution. That's a differentiator. So that's going to be something that really will pull them into your community and keep them there. But if that goes away and they don't feel that, you may not know it. So you really have to keep that relational experience alive and keep checking in.
Yeah, and so you both may have already answered this, but how do the millennials shop for a school? You're talking about relationships. You're talking about the web. Is there a typical characteristics of what they go through to search for a school from what you're seeing?
Yeah, so there's some good stats on this. One that I like, and it's sort of buried and difficult to find, is the National Center for Education Statistics. They did a study called School Choice in the United States 2019, which doesn't sound like it would have great stats on nationwide, private and public school enrollment, but it does. So you can search for that, and we can maybe post it somewhere if you need to find it. But it is got really good information on demographics, why parents sort of choose the schools that they do. So that's sort of a good starting place. And then you kind of have to use anecdotal evidence and look for what people in your local area are doing. In my area, what I've noticed is that millennials sort of seek a trusted advisor, and we'll do front-end research before proactively reaching out. And I've seen that with a lot of schools that I've worked with, in workshops that I've done. That seems to be the case. So we're seeing a lot more of that. And the idea of what a trusted advisor actually is now varies a lot from what we typically think of. In the past, when we'd say word of mouth, a trusted advisor would be a friend, a pastor, maybe someone in your mom group, your friend group. And a trusted advisor now could be someone that is in a Facebook group, like a local Facebook group, or, you know, an article that you read, or some, you know, it can be someone that you don't even know, and that's just making a local recommendation. And that could be enough for a millennial to start doing their own research. So that's sort of like the next phase of that shopping process, where you would do a lot of your own front-end research, and then the proactive reach out happens after they're already fairly confident that they want a closer look. I think that we have been talking about this for several years. You know, millennials aren't going to ask for a campus tour until they're already fairly sure that they're interested. I think post-COVID, that is going to be even more so the case. Parents are not going to tentatively be like, we're going to spend a lot of time going out and going through physical institutions at whatever point that can happen, until we're fairly certain that we're going to be moving ahead. So that's something that I'm, you know, assuming is going to be happening going forward. I think that certain schools can rely on the influence that they get from local churches or parishes. They'll also have legacy families. If you're in a smaller city or a community, you can rely on the reputation you have in that city. But I think that in larger urban areas or heavily populated areas, it is harder to stand out. And in that case, you do need to put forth a little bit of work in creating sort of a new level of brand ambassadorship that can become that trusted advisor to strangers. And that sounds crazy, but you know, if you're trying to recruit cold families and pull them away from other institutions, I think that that's instead of, you know, you can always do paid ads, things like that, other lead generating strategies. But if you're going to do sort of guerrilla marketing, organic marketing that way, that's a good strategy to use.
Yeah, and we're actually going to get into those strategies. But Courtney, you were going to say something?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, when you talk about what Jaclyn's talking about, kind of brand ambassadors, I heard a great webinar the other day. It was not school specific. It was just about general marketing, but they were talking about brands, kind of millennial friendly brands like Away Luggage and Casper Mattress and Peloton Bike. And they were talking about how brands like that hardly have to do any traditional marketing, because millennials believe that those brands align with what they believe, right? And so it's almost like it just kind of the marketing takes care of itself. And I think you can extrapolate that with schools too, because if they do have a trusted advisor, whatever that looks like, who is giving them the information, it really makes our jobs a lot easier as school marketers. And I just, you know, you think about the fact that there is an actual job of being an influencer, right? Like that's a real live thing. And so people get paid, you know, companies pay people to promote their products online. That's just the normal mindset these days. And if you think about, again, it's not an exact one-to-one correlation, but if you think about who in your school that you can tap into, I guess, to become influencers, this is nothing different than what Rick Newberry has been talking about for 10 years, right? Rick has been talking about word of mouth strategies. Again, they look a little bit different in 2020, but really and truly, there's really nothing new under the sun. Just looks a little different.
Yeah, and I really appreciate your comments and sharing. And hopefully all you out there are enjoying the show today. We're going to talk in the second half about some of the specific strategies that we can implement to reach our millennial parents. But I just wanted to acknowledge several other people who've joined the broadcast. Amy's here from St. Mary in Connecticut. Kristen's here from Johnstown Christian. I already mentioned those, actually, so I got to go down a little bit further. So you get a double mention. Leslie's here from Southfield School in Shreveport, Louisiana. school that I worked with. Doug is here from John Paul II Catholic in Greenville, North Carolina. Of course, my mom and dad are here. They're always a faithful audience participant. And Don's here from Academy of the Sacred Heart, and they use FACS at their school. So feel free to share in where you're from. We'd love to just see that in the comments section. And if you do have a question for Jaclyn or Courtney, feel free to enter that into the comments section as well. And if you like the show, click that like button and let us know. Definitely would appreciate that along the way. So let's talk about strategies that we should use to reach millennials. So just kind of a big picture overview, and then we'll get into some of the specifics. But what would you suggest are some of the top strategies that we need to put in place to reach millennials?
So I've thought a little bit about this, and my advice to schools has changed over time, full disclosure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So recently I've been thinking a little bit about outcomes, selling your school. And the reason for this is at some point, every school starts really looking the same. And I think that millennials have a hard time differentiating between private schools at that point and saying what really is this school versus this school versus this school. Sometimes word of mouth can help push them over the edge, which is why that is so critical. Otherwise, it really comes down to outcomes. And so how do you promote your own outcomes on your website? And so I think that right now we're focusing on doing some really cool, necessary things like virtual campus tours. We'll talk tactically about that. And it's a great idea right now. Virtual admissions, we have to do it. But all of those tactics everybody's going to have them in 3 or 4 months. And so what are the messages that will consistently win families? And so we have to think about universal things that will continue to work despite a pandemic, despite a virtual admissions pivot, despite a distance learning pivot. And for your school, I think that has to be the outcomes that you provide. So for a millennial family, you have to be able to answer a few questions. And I got this from a conference that I attended last year, and I forget the name of the speaker right now. I'm so sorry. But she was talking about specifically how outcomes are the one thing that differentiates a sale versus walking away from that sale. And if you, as the product or service or school, can answer these questions, then you will help that person along through, in our case, the admissions funnel. So for example, how are you going to save this family money? And that seems like sort of a weird statement, because a lot of times as private schools, we're trying to say, let's not talk about the money. Let's not talk about the money at all. But I think that that's a really critical question. So how will you save the money? We can talk about financial aid. We could talk about payment plans. We can talk about how we are a good value, or better education equals a better future. How will we save them time? Maybe we have convenience. We can save them time in the morning. We have before care and after care. Maybe our communication is better from school to home. Maybe they have to do less academic hand-holding. Maybe we lower their risk as a family. Maybe how do we assist their family in their need for change? They obviously need a change if they're looking. So how do we do that? And how do we advance their family's priorities? So the way that we communicate the answers to these questions are universal, whether COVID's happening or not. So I think that at the very least, schools, the strategy schools should use are testimonials from current families in video form, case studies in longer formats, written blog posts, whatever, brand ambassadors that are willing to talk about their experience with inquiring families, and being willing to engage in online discussions when people are asking for school recommendations. So if you see a post online where someone is saying, hey, can you recommend a preschool program in our community, and you have a really good preschool, you have a brand ambassador from your group of families who's willing to engage in that discussion.
Mm-hmm. And I would just add on that too, when you're getting the message out there, don't be afraid to try new things and kind of to play with new things. I know, I mentioned most of us that work in admissions and marketing in K-12 are not trained traditional marketers. So we've kind of had to learn on the job. I remember when I first did my first, dipping in the waters of online ads about 5 years ago, I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. And my very first ad on Facebook for an open house that was coming up, and again, Facebook has come a long way too. You can target much more than this, but I said, please serve up this ad to moms in my area who like yoga, Downton Abbey, that was big at the time, and Jesus, because I was at a Christian school. And I just thought I was so sophisticated.
What a mix.
Yeah, that is a mix.
That's published. Now, I mean, I've come a long way, but I have no idea what the return on investment on that was. But my point is, what did it hurt? Maybe it got me some leads, which again, I would not recommend not following up to see if you are getting a return on investment. But online ads, Facebook ads, Instagram ads are super cheap. Even most of us do not have giant marketing budgets in K-12 private schools, but it's just something, the worst thing that can happen is you serve up an ad to a prospective millennial family and they hit hide ad, irrelevant, never want to see again. The best thing that can happen is you give them some awareness for your school or they end up becoming a student or a raving fan, which is always kind of the ultimate goal. So I just encourage people to try it because it's not nearly as scary as it seems like it is.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's talk about the web a little bit because that's obviously a key tool that all millennials are using. You talked about that. You talked also about the power of testimonials. So I'm thinking about websites and social media and other ways online that we can reach millennials. And so advice, recommendations for what needs to be done.
So I think right now, a lot of people are pivoting the same direction and doing the virtual admissions, virtual open house. And I think that that's really critical. But one thing I'd like to add to that mix is being prepared for all possible scenarios and leaving room for the uncertainty that's happening right now. I think that we're perhaps overcommitting to the virtual world, and we're overcommitting to distance learning and virtual school and not leaving room in our minds for the uncertainty that in some cases there may be combinations of physical school and virtual school in the fall, or some schools may be going back altogether. Some schools may be completely distance learning in the fall. Totally depends on where you are in the US. Totally depends on various circumstances. We just don't know. And I think that a lot of parents right now are living in that uncertainty. And so I think that offering sort of a nod to that would be very compelling on the web. So saying something like, here is a look at what your physical classroom would look like if we come back in the fall. So taking the virtual tour a step further. So do it by grade level, right? So here's your second grade classroom if we were to come back in the fall. And here is a sample distance learning plan if you were to be at home for a day. And this is how it would look if we combined the two. And say, we don't know what's happening, acknowledge the fact that we don't know what's happening yet, but we have a plan no matter what happens. I haven't seen a school yet say that. And I think that that would be really compelling as a marketing message to millennials, because public schools right now are in a bad place. And I think that they are sort of saying, we don't know yet, we don't know yet, we don't know yet. But I think parents are really craving someone to say, don't worry, we'll take care of it. You can trust us. We'll have a plan. And obviously, it's really hard for a public school district to offer that kind of statement at this point. So you might be able to pull a lot of people from the public district with that kind of message. Alternatively, your competitors in the area may not have that kind of calming, soothing message. So I think that what schools are doing now with their distance learning plan, their virtual tours and so on, there's a way to sort of take that a step further and acknowledge, we'll be prepared for whatever comes next. Combining that with testimonials from parents of how well you have done with your distance learning so far, I think would be a really awesome marketing package to parents right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great advice, definitely, because we want to show the value of what we've been able to do, and also create this expectation that we've got it under control in the best way that we can, with all this uncertainty out there, that we're going to be prepared. We know that next year is still up in the air, but we're going to have our act together where we can go in this direction, or this direction, depending upon what happens. So, What about on the admissions side? So, Courtney, you talked a lot about, the relationships and creating those with parents in admissions. As we think about reaching millennials today, how would you all recommend that we communicate to families through that admissions process?
Yeah, I think one thing, this should go without saying, and anybody who's joining today that has seen any of Rick's shows, we kind of this has been the resounding gong, is your website has got to reflect what's going on right now, period. So if you're looking at your website and it still looks like we're in January, there's a problem. Jaclyn had a great example the other day. She doesn't remember the name of the school, which is good, because that way we won't call the school out. But there was a parent testimonial on the admissions page, and it said the only way you have to come on campus to really get to know this school. And Jaclyn was like, you need to read the room. Like this needs to come down for now. So I think doing a pretty intense audit of kind of what is on your website, to Jaclyn's point, showing millennial parents that you've got a plan A, B, and C. I think about, I'm not even in the market for a school, but that would be extremely comforting to me to know, okay, this school knows what they're doing. They're not just sitting there waiting for something to happen. Just from a real practical, tactical standpoint, if you have never tried like a chat widget on your website, now is a great time to do that. Because again, I know we have a lot of schools where the admissions phone is forwarded to the admissions officer's cell phone at home or something like that. But frankly, again, this is not really a millennial thing. I think this is just a 2020 thing. If I need information, I am always going to pick the chat feature over the pick up a phone and call. And so I think it's just another way to show that we have good customer service skills. We're given lots of different ways for millennials to contact us. I've used, and I know you've talked about this before, Rick, but I've used a system called OLARK, O-L-A-R-K. It's very simple to install on your website. There's also one that we played with recently called Pure Chat. There's a free version, and then you can get some more bells and whistles with the paid version. But one of the things that I really liked about that is if you, and again, this is a great time to try this kind of stuff, but if you also have a lead nurturing sequence set up of emails in either HubSpot or MailChimp or Constant Contact, Pure Chat, you can do some more analytics and feed those leads of people who are on certain pages of your website into different workflows in MailChimp. So for example, Pure Chat will see that someone has been on the financial aid page for X number of minutes and give you those analytics, and you can put parameters in place and say if they've been on the financial aid place for X number of minutes, then send their name and email to this workflow, which is going to be a set of financial aid emails. Again, if this sounds scary to you, it's not. Now is the time. We've got all the time in the world at home now, and we're about to enter in the summer. Most of us are probably not going to be going back in the office anytime soon. So now is the time to set up those things. I know when I talk to admissions directors, that's always our number one thing, is we just don't have enough hours in the day. We can't get anything done because we have, interruption after interruption. Well, there's no more excuses. There's no interruptions at home. Now is the time to not only to kind of play with those things, but it's a real service that is needed right now with everybody from home. So I would say things like chat. I know Jaclyn has a couple of options of like text, opt-in text services as well.
Yeah, so that's something too on the admission side. So once you kind of get people in that inquiry funnel, and I think you mentioned that you're doing some inbound live, so you'll probably talk a little bit about lead nurturing, which is exciting. But using a text platform to communicate versus email, I think is a really great option. Textedly, Hustle, SendHub, those are low-cost options where you can have people opt in.
Can you repeat those?
Yep, sure. Textedly,
Textedly, okay.
Hustle, and SendHub. And so you can use those to text with inquiries or applicants as opposed to email. And I think especially right now where our focus is being pulled in so many directions, I know that my personal email as well as my work email are disasters, that my inbox is blowing up because everyone is trying to reach everybody. And text is a great way to get in front of people in a more direct way. There's also a ton of statistics about how millennials read text faster than they read email and also engage with it more. So there's a lot to be said for reaching out to an inquiry, let's say, try to pull them into the application funnel and saying something like, hey, we haven't heard from you in a couple weeks. We're thinking of you. Hope you're all right. Would you be interested in, speaking to our head of school? Are there any questions we can answer from you? Or something like, would you be interested in seeing a sample distance learning program or a day in the life thing? Something like that. Or send them a video link through the text. But anyway, that's an example of sort of a mini lead nurturing process that you could do via text. And that's sort of a soft reach out that wouldn't be too annoying. And a parent may be like, oh, I completely forgot, as opposed to an email, which is much easier to ignore. Trust me.
Yeah, I mean, with the text message, they're going to see it right on their phone. And that's the beauty of it. Whereas email, they may not see that.
Yeah.
And they have to go in and open it up. And but texting is a great way to reach your prospective parents. As long as, like you said, you don't do it in an annoying way.
Right.
We don't want to send out mass text to, our audience, about everything. We want to be really specific as we develop that relationship with these parents. So,
well, if you've gone through the trouble of filling out an inquiry form and you've gotten to that point where because I think that the act of filling out an inquiry form is a pretty proactive step on the part of a family at this point. I think that there are exceptions where people are just, filling them out, whatever. But I think for the most part, families who are willing to give their information out to a school are to some extent very interested. And the school has to do some outreach to continue to pull them through. So if you have somewhere on that form, would you prefer to be reached out to via text or via phone or via email? Guess which one I'm going to check. I don't want more phone calls.
Exactly. Because we're all screening our calls anyway,
Yeah.
I never answer my phone. So
exactly. And if I get an email, it's going to be wedged in between the 300 other promotional emails that I get in a day. So
exactly.
It's a smart tactic.
Yeah, so we have a few minutes left. I want to make sure you have an opportunity. If you have any questions that you want to ask Courtney or Jaclyn, feel free to do that because we would love to hear your comments and questions for these two experts on millennial marketing that we have for this hour together. And but as we're kind of looking toward wrapping it up on the top of the hour, I'm just, as other questions might come in, I was just thinking about how you guys might tie this all together. Any other recommendations that we can use to reach millennials, or maybe what would you reemphasize that we've talked about today, if you were to summarize?
So I would say if you are not a millennial like me, just do your research. There is one of the things that's been really cool to see over the last 2 to 3 months is how much content is out there for specifically for admissions and enrollment and marketing. Not that there wasn't before, but everybody very quickly pivoted. So obviously you should follow Enrollment Catalyst and you should tune in every Thursday at noon.
There you go. Thank you for that endorsement.
Absolutely. Did not pay me to say that.
No.
But in addition, if you're not familiar with Final Sight is one of FACT's partners, and they have incredible content as well. They actually did an entire marketing day that has passed, but you can still register to get the recordings. Jaclyn mentioned Atlas, Inspired School Marketing with Rob and Liza Fisher. If you are familiar with Rick, you are probably also familiar with Brendan Schneider. He's the Director of Advancement at Swickley Academy, also has Schneider B, and he has some great resources specifically. I think one of the things that really kind of boggled my mind was that idea of a combination of analog lead nurturing, very personalized, and automated lead nurturing through something like a HubSpot or a MailChimp. He has some content on his website that really lays that out literally like step 1, step 2, step 3. So that's something I would recommend. And then, of course, all of our professional organizations, ISM, NCEA, ASAP, EMA. There's so many free resources out there on how to do our job better. And then right now, there's a ton of resources on how to pivot due to COVID-19. And there's just we don't have any excuse right now with, I don't want to be flippant by saying all this time on our hands, because I feel like I've been busier since we've been remote working than I was before. But it is a time, that at least it's fewer distractions. And so this is the time to really dig in and see what people are doing out there. Rick posts all kinds of stuff on his Enrollment Catalyst Facebook sites about other schools that are doing really, really great things that have virtual admissions options, just like he showed at the beginning. So again, I would recommend just diving into all the stuff that's out there right now.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to pull all that information, just read over that stuff. Even if you read a couple articles a day, that stuff eventually just sort of sinks in and becomes second nature. And, I think that the most important thing to do right now and into the future is just understand that marketing is moving to more personalization. And so school marketing is doing the same thing. The more we can personalize, the more that we can make it feel like we're reaching out to one family at a time, the more successful we'll be. And then you can start to pull that into the way that you talk about admissions. You can pull that into the way that you think about your advancement programs, your fundraising programs. It will all become very personalized. Storytelling will be involved. We need to talk about families and the way that our school is affecting specific families and the outcomes that those families are achieving. And I think that is a really successful marketing effort. And then pull those people in through the admissions process that way. I think that's sort of what sets one school apart from another. If I'm looking at 4 school websites, and one school is very clear about how their school has affected the outcomes of individual families, and the other school is just talking about their sports programs and their academics at a high level, that's very different experience for me as a parent. So we kind of have to look at ourselves like a third party and say, understand that millennials really want to see their kid, put their kid in the pictures that they're viewing, see their kid in that situation. They're sort of daydreaming, and it's all about relationships, all about experiences. So that's sort of what I try to think about at a high level as I'm working through all these tactics.
Some great advice. In fact, 2 weeks ago, I did an interview with the team from Ben Lippen School. And Ben Lippen is a FACT school, and they talked a lot about storytelling. And if you go to their website, you can see how they've utilized that as part of their marketing effort. So great advice, Jaclyn and Courtney. I really appreciate you being on the show today. And for those of you who didn't watch this live, you'll hopefully been able to see the recording. And so just a lot of insight here and advice as we think about reaching millennials. Next Thursday, 12 o'clock, same time, same location. Our topic's going to be online lead generation. So we're going to have Andy Lynch and Clark Morgan from North Star Marketing will be joining me for that live show next week. And so they're experts in this area and talking through paid search and landing pages and downloadable content and how we can most effectively reach parents out there. So I see Courtney's taking a picture. So that's awesome. Yes. And looks like there may be a comment coming in. Yeah, Jill's just saying thanks. So she appreciates the broadcast and the live show today. So thanks to everyone out there, and hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. And thanks, Jaclyn and Courtney, for being a part of the show today.
Thank you.
Thanks so
Great
much.
to be here.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.